So, in continuing my series on my discussion of the current state of North American Counter-Strike Global Offensive, in this video I'll be taking a look at Team Liquid, one of the other top teams in the NA scene right now that are vying for their place in the sun, so to speak, of North American CSGO. And essentially the data on this team is very limited. I mean, for the set file that they have right now today, they've only played in just a handful of events over the last couple of months, really. So the data is very limited, so the conclusions that I could come up with are also going to be very limited. I'm not sure how much weight they truly hold, but I'm going to try my best to give you at least a brief look at the team's recent past and what their outlook is kind of going forward and what some of the issues they might be having that they need to kind of address. Now, the way this team got any sort of notoriety was as Denial Esports at the Season 17 ESEA LAN, which whenever they had Anger instead of Nitro, and they still had Shazam instead of Adren, so a different five. So that's why I'm saying the data's kind of limited, but this is the best that I can do. Now, coming into this event, they hadn't always done the best. In October of 2014, they had played in the CEVO Season 5 LAN, and they had done very poorly. They got eliminated in 2 best-of-3s, and they weren't really competitive at all in the event. Now, granted, they had Juvenile instead of Anger, so they had already made one roster change since then, but coming into the Season 17 event, weren't really sure how well they were going to do just because of how things went in October at the CEVO event. They come into the Season 17 event in July of 2014, so December of 2014, so just a couple of months ago, basically. And they come into this event, and they do really well, actually. They play Titan first, actually a pretty competitive best-of-3. They go to overtime in the first map, which is Inferno. So right off the bat, they're actually looking much improved since a couple of months before when they had done so poorly in CEVO's event. And they wound up losing the series 0-2, but like I said, they're competitive in the series, and they go down to the lower bracket. From the lower bracket, they're able to eliminate Elevate from the tournament in a 2-1 series, pretty close series. Once again, they're still looking pretty good. Then they go on to play against Cloud9, and they eliminate Cloud9 from the tournament. So this is one of the biggest results from the tournament, one of the more shocking results within NA standards, at least. To eliminate them 2-0, overtime victory on Inferno, then a close 16-14 game on Mirage. So, this is a good showing for the team. And they go on to lose to iBuyPower, but they're even competitive in that series, too, for 4th place. So, with a 4th place finish, this team looks pretty good. Now, I know this is not the same five as they have now, but it's notable that at this point, we're already starting to see some potential in some of their players. So, Fugly looks really good at this event. Naf looks really good at this event. Shazam looked really good at this event, which is a lot of the reason why he got poached by Cloud9 later on. And so they show some potential. And Daps even didn't play badly or anything like that. He played his part, and he's the in-game leader of the team. He fragged pretty well. The only person who really played poorly is Anger, and they're going to get rid of him later whenever they get Nitro back and they pick up Adren for Shazam. So they get forced into one of their roster changes with Shazam leaving, and now they bring in Adren. And then they get Nitro back, because Nitro had played on this team prior to going to iBuyPower for, DreamHack winner and the Season 17 event. So they get Nitro back, and this guy has shown a lot of promise on this iBuyPower team in those 2 events, and they had a lot of hype surrounding him. Even Thorn was making a video about, him not giving up after the iBuyPower thing and how he looked really good and had some potential, and he does. So basically coming out of the year of 2014, they have a 4th place finish at ESEA LAN. They improved their roster, in my opinion, and getting Nitro back was huge. And I know they lost Shazam, but Adren's a very capable opper still, and he also adds a lot of in-game leading ability and a lot of experience. It's something that this team definitely lacks at this point. So from here, they go on and they play in the Aspen qualifiers. Now, this is kind of one of their first struggles because they actually don't qualify for the event. So in one of the qualification tournaments, they get eliminated by iBuyPower, basically, when they have Hiko and they brought Days back, and they're not iBuyPower anymore sponsorship-wise, but it's that same group of players, and they lose this event, or they lose this qualifier, and they get eliminated from that one. And the next one, they actually get upset by this Lunatic Esports team, which is now Denial. This is a team that features like your Flowsick and Valens and Slimmy, and some of these other different guys that make up now what is Denial Esports, and they get upset by this team in one of the other MLG Aspen qualifiers. So this was a bit disappointing. Out of all the stuff that they've done, this is probably one of the more disappointing things, is not being able to get that qualification spot via losing to this particular team. It doesn't wind up mattering, though, because they get a direct invite to the event as a replacement team whenever, of course, the iBuyPower can't go because of all the banning situations and whatnot. Now, once they get to the Aspen event, I mean, they pretty much perform as expected, right? Like, they were in the group with LDLC, Fnatic, and CLG. Most people are kind of wondering who will win between CLG and Liquid. Both, have a pretty kind of an equal chance in most people's eyes. And most people thought, yeah, they'll just lose to LDLC and Fnatic, and those two teams will advance no problem. Well, that is pretty much what happens. They actually do get a big win against CLG on cash, like 16-3, 16-2. And I've already kind of talked about this in the CLG video from CLG's perspective and what it meant for them. But for Liquid, that was a good win, to get a win against one of the other top North American teams. I mean, that's proven a lot. They're a last-minute replacement team. They had only found out they were going to the event a couple of days before traveling there. So the results here aren't very disappointing. I mean, they lose to the two best teams in the world, and they beat CLG. So no real disappointment here. Yeah, they didn't gain anything. They pretty much just sit in the same boat, but they didn't lose anything, and it wasn't that disappointing. So when they go on the ClutchCon the next weekend, once again, they take care of business. I mean, they get out of group play, they come into the bracket, they play against Torqued, the pug that has like Skadoodle and Mo and Desi and Frost and TCK, or no, Summit, excuse me. And I mean, while that was a pug, there's still some good fraggers on that team, and they can still be pretty dangerous as a pug, especially on some maps. And Liquid beat them. They played really good. Adren was opping really well in this series, and they just played really good. They looked good. Then they had to play against Fnatic next, and they lose. And, well, Fnatic crushed pretty much everybody at this event except for Kaboom on Mirage. So, once again, this is not a very disappointing performance by Liquid. I mean, they pretty much performed right where people thought they would. It's just they didn't gain anything, once again. So they may be missing out on opportunities to advance themselves up the ranks and to establish themselves as being a team on the rise and being better, but they still firmly place themselves in kind of this top four of NA, and they're not necessarily losing to teams they shouldn't be losing to. So they're just not gaining anything. It's kind of neutral, so to speak, right? So then they go to the Katowice qualifiers. And here, disappointing. They had to play both their games on Mirage. Now, first of all, Mirage is one of their worst maps besides Overpass, so they already have to play on a weaker map of theirs because apparently, from what I understand from talking to Dats, both their stronger maps got eliminated by the opposing team in the veto phase, and their map pool just isn't deep. And that might be one of their issues, is their map pool is not deep enough. They don't have enough maps that they're good on. So the fact that once two of their maps got vetoed, they pretty much had nothing left they could play that they were really good on. They had already vetoed the two maps they definitely don't want to play. Their two best maps got vetoed, so they were pretty much stuck with playing Mirage in both their games, and Mirage is not a good map for them. But even so, they play against Copenhagen Wolves, and they lose this one. Pretty close game, not like a blowout by any means, but they lose. And then they have a really close 16-14 game against Flipside Tactics. And I think Flipside Tactics was the favorited team anyway, based on the experience of that team and the talent on that team. They were the favorites anyway. So it's really no surprise, once again, from Liquid. So, once again, even at this event, it's not really that disappointing or that bad because they weren't favored against Flipside Tactics anyway. So that loss is expected. And yeah, maybe they could have beat Copenhagen Wolves. It's not like Copenhagen Wolves is like this amazing elite level European team, but they're still pretty good. They still have some talent. They definitely have more experience still than Liquid does. But they can't get it done. They're just not a good Mirage team. But I will say this, okay? When you look at this particular event, and this is in general one of the issues with Liquid, so now we're going to kind of transition to some of the problems that Liquid has that they need to maybe kind of address to get better. Because while they may not have been disappointing, and while their results may not be underwhelming or they're not necessarily underperforming based on people's expectations, they're not really gaining anything. They're not really moving up. They're not improving. So why might this be the case? What's some of the issues they're facing that are causing them not to improve? And this we're going to kind of transition now there. And one of these things is they're sloppy. They do have some sloppy play. Like, even though I know Mirage is not one of their good maps, there's still certain smokes and certain things that you should know how to do, that you should be able to consistently do. So smoke placement at the A-bomb site, on top stairs, at that jungle connector area, CT spawn. Those are the three most common smokes thrown for executions on Mirage. Now, I know Mirage has also taken this kind of new turn at the A-bomb site where you kind of see like the Kaboom smokes, where you throw deeper smokes in jungle and connectors so you can actually attack the stairs in the jungle area, and then you kind of throw some smokes throughout the center of the site to still kind of block off CT spawn, but also to cut off players under balcony and firebox and such, and get plants in the center of the site inside the smoke. But regardless, if you're not going to get that technical, you should at least know your three more basic smokes. But they were missing their smokes quite a lot on the A-bomb side, actually, and because of it, when they would execute A, there was gaps all over the place, and so, they were just getting eaten alive when they tried to walk into the A-bomb site in many cases. In other cases, they were just lack discipline. There were people kind of taking these individual peaks when they didn't really need to on T side, like Adren, their oppers, trying to work picks at mid at window room and trying to work his way up slowly, kind of check cat ladder room, try to maybe get to connector, work some picks there, and before he can even work his picks with the op, which seems to be the strat they're trying to run in some of these particular instances, there's people already dropping left and right all over the place at the A bomb site. Like it's like they're always halfway committing to executing something at A, and no, they're not on the same page. They just look sloppy. They just don't look to be on the same page, basically. So that is one problem they have, is they just don't seem to be on the same page. They seem to be a little bit sloppy in their play, and maybe it's unfair to say that on their weaker map, Mirage, but still you got to be somewhat. You got to be somewhat together. You kind of have to know what you're doing, and it just seemed like they were kind of lost and just sloppy and not on the same page on those Mirage games. So we've already established they need a bigger map pool. They apparently don't have enough maps they're good on to survive a veto phase, especially in a best-of-1 game like this. They seem sloppy and a little not on the same page and lack discipline in many regards on some of their attacks. And this is even seen in some of their NA games. So I watched them play a game on Season against Lunatic, like the new Lunatic, which isn't really that amazing of an NA team, to be honest. They're nowhere near the top 4 or top 5 of NA. And they lost the game on DE Season. I know it's a map they're once again not that familiar with because it's not played a whole lot, but they lose 16-5 in this game. And what I saw in this game, and this is exactly what I saw in their Mirage games at Katowice qualifiers, was that they just looked sloppy. Like in post-plan situations, they were just not in good positions to trade. They weren't hitting their shots. They just didn't look well put together in some of these scenarios. They just looked like they weren't on the same page, and I see that quite a lot in some of their games. So that they just need to kind of work on having better team chemistry and communication and making sure everyone knows what they're doing and when to do it, and just I keep saying being on the same page. That's really the best way to put it. Now, why might this be the case? And this is because one of the other big problems this team suffers from is they lack experience. Let me just point this out to you. When it comes to Daps, Fugly, and Naf, these guys have never really been to any big LAN events up until October of last year when they played in that SIVO LAN against some big North American teams. And then their real first time playing against European teams was at the Season 17 ESEA LAN in December of 2014, which was just a couple of months ago. And the same really could be said that's for Daps, Fugly, and Naf. Now, Nitro, the same thing can pretty much be said about him. The only advantage he has experience-wise over these other three guys is that he played at DreamHack Winter 2014 against some European teams prior to that Season 17 ESEA LAN in December. So he had a little bit more experience against European teams, but not really. I guess he got to do some boot camping while they were there too. So he got a little bit more experience against European teams, and yeah, he's shown some promise and some potential in his fragging in these limited events we're talking about. But in general, this team is very young, very inexperienced, very raw, and so it's going to take them some time to get up to speed. And this is kind of part of what we're talking about when we talked about how how me and some other people have talked about, the top of NA being ripped off with iBuyPower being gone and Torch being gone, some of these other talented players being gone. And people have to come in and fill the void who are newer, who are less experienced, who need time to evolve and adapt. And so it's going to take some time. And I think Liquid's a perfect example of this. You could say the same thing about CLG, really, too. And I kind of did hint at some of their inexperience there. But it's definitely the case here on Liquid as well, and maybe even more so than CLG. So, yeah, they just lack experience. They're really young. They're going to take some time to get up to speed. Now, there's a couple other concerns to have as well. And the two that I can come up with is one is the role of Adren. So first of all, some people don't realize that this is actually the first time he's been a main opper for a pro team ever in the history of CSGO. So when he played for Dynamic, it was AZK. When he played for Curse and iBuyPower, it was Skadoodle. And then he took some time off and he played with some friends and some amateur team as an opper. But then he came back to this team and now he's an opper. So this is the first time in CSGO he's been a main opper. Now, there was an instance at the Season 15 ESEA LAN when he was playing with iBuyPower when they were having that run against Titan in the Grand Finals, where he did pick up the op a bit more, and he was kind of the main opper instead of Skadoodle for that one particular event. But for the most part, he's always been a rifler or a secondary opper. So this is his first team where that's his primary role, is to just op. That's what he does. So I think the data's kind of limited on whether or not he's effective in that role or not. I honestly don't ever expect them to be like crazy amazing, like some of the top ops in the world, or I don't ever even expect them to maybe be like as good as a Skadoodler or somebody in NA. But I think that the jury's still out on how good he really can be as an opera for this team. Honestly, in most games, I haven't seen him have the opportunity to really use it because they seem to be getting crushed too badly before he can even afford one. Or when he does afford one, it seems like the team's falling apart before he even gets a chance to work his picks or to try to work the op like the way that he wants to. So I think the data is very limited on how well he can be, how well he can opt for this team. So I don't want to quite say that he can't fill that role just yet, because like I said, it just seems like there's a bunch of other issues going on that affect his ability to even try and do that for the team. Now, the other thing you can say about Adren is, out of all the people left in NA, because Sean's the in-game leader for Cloud9, so he's locked in. Daze is banned and gone, so you can't do anything about him. Finesse is locked in on CLG, and we're kind of still uncertain of how he fits on that team as an in-game leader and how that team's direction is going to go. But if you were going to get anybody else to be your in-game leader in NA, when all those people are tied up, Adren really is the best option. Yet for some reason, Daps is still the in-game leader for this team officially. At least that's how it was at the Katowice qualifiers and at ClutchCon and at Aspen. I don't know if they're going to change that now. Maybe they already have, but I think that's an issue. I think Adren definitely has the experience where everyone else, like, he's the most experienced player on this team by far. And so, and it's already used to being an in-game leader for many teams. Even when he was playing for iBuyPower and Daze was the in-game leader, he still had a lot of influence on that team, a lot more than people maybe know about. Especially in that event where they beat Titan, those back-to-back best-of-threes. Adren was calling the majority of the shots in that particular game. I was sitting behind the team, so I heard it firsthand. I know. So he definitely can be a good in-game leader, especially if he commits to it and is scouting demos and is really, running his team through stuff and just really focusing on. I think Adren could be a very good in-game leader for this team. Yet he's not that. He's kind of just a secondary caller, and Das is still at the helm. And I think that's kind of a waste of Adren's experience and talent whenever he's not the main leading force of this team. Especially because they do have so much inexperience and youth on the team, and I think he can really help with that. I mean, even talking to Adren, he's like in this boat where there's just so many things that he knows from his experience that this team just has no clue about, and it's almost as if he has to kind of help bring them up to speed in many cases, it seems. So yeah, that's one thing. The other thing to talk about is in relation to the inexperience and in-game leading, they picked up a coach. They picked up Warden, right? He's supposed to be the coach of this team. He was behind them at ClutchCon, and he helped them out at ClutchCon. From what I hear from talking to him and from talking to the team, he was really hands-on with the team at ClutchCon when they were playing against Torqued in that best-of-3, and he pointed out mistakes that they were making. He pointed out trends and patterns of their opponent that they could try to exploit. He kind of calmed them down when some of the players were bickering at each other. He'd be like, hey, stop that. This is what you need to do. So apparently he was really helpful and beneficial to the team in realizing some of their mistakes and giving them a third-party perspective on what's going on in the game. And he wasn't calling strats, but he was actively coaching the team and helping them out and getting them through some things, for what I understand. So you think this is great, especially for a team with so much inexperience. It's great to kind of have a veteran helping out and kind of, being behind the team and supporting them. Yet he wasn't at the Katowice qualifiers, the most important event that this team has been at since they've been a team. The chance to get their sponsor permanently branded in the game in the form of a sticker, to represent their country as one of the first NA teams outside of Cloud9 iBuyPower to represent North America at a 250K major. This is the biggest event that they're going to be at, and they don't have their coach there, this guy who did have a profound impact on their performance at ClutchCon. And this just is mind-boggling, and not at the same time, because I know why he wasn't there. I mean, this dude has a full-time career in the healthcare field. I think he's a nurse, if I'm not mistaken, but either way, he definitely has a full-time job, over 40 hours a week, working in the healthcare industry. So obviously he can't commit to being like a full-time coach for this team. And I'll also admit that the jury is kind of out on how much effect the coach really does have in Counter-Strike. Like, we know PETA coaches NIP, but I've never really seen any in-depth articles about, how much influence PETA has on the team and calling and how much he actually aids the team. Same could be said about I work for Titan. I have no clue how much impact he has on that team and stuff like that. The only time we've ever really had some type of in-depth data about the effect of a coach on a team was, I guess, with Blade with Hellraisers at DreamHack 2014, because he was actively calling strats for them in group play, and we saw him with the headset on calling strats for them, and he seemed to help that team out. But in general, we don't really know how good coaching is anyway in CSGO. It seems there doesn't need to be much study on the effect that coaching has had on some of these teams that do have coaches. So maybe it doesn't matter, right? But from what the team told me, he did help them out a lot at ClutchCon. And we've already also talked about the amount of inexperience that the team has, so to have a veteran there helps them out a lot. So it seems like the team's saying he can have a profound impact. The way that the way that things are in this team situation, it seems like he could have a profound impact too. So you have the teams, telling you it could be beneficial, and you can see how it could be beneficial from the situation they're in. Yet he's not at this big event, and that's huge. I think. That you wouldn't have a coach in this big important event. Now, like I said, I realize why he can't be there, but listen, if you're going to commit to having a coach, he needs to be at big events like this. So either you need to find a different coach, or you just need to give up on the whole coaching aspect in general. Because from what I have been told from talking to Liquid personally, the only coaching that Warden has done for them was at ClutchCon since Warden was hired as a coach. So it seems like it's almost useless. Like, he's not helping them online. He, apparently, from what I'm being told, he didn't help them prepare at all for Katowice. So when they're online, he's not helping them at all. He's not, reviewing demos. He's not in practice with them. He's not doing anything in that regard. So really, the only time he's ever done anything for them is at LAN. Yet he only was at ClutchCon and not at Aspen X Games or at Katowice qualifier. So it seems like this whole coaching thing is useless almost, because it's not being used effectively when they need it. I can understand why. Like I said, I'm not expecting Warden to give up his full-time career in the healthcare field to step into coaching, but, either cut it or find someone else, or just give up on it, because it seems like it's not doing you any bit of good. So let's see, we've talked about issues with sloppiness and with lack of discipline. We've talked about inexperience and youth on the team. We've talked about how the coaching thing doesn't really seem to be implemented properly on this team. Their map pool isn't very good. They don't seem to have a whole lot of maps that they're good on, so when two of their best maps get vetoed, they're pretty much screwed in the best of one. So these are definitely all things that need to be addressed and worked on. So deepening their map pool, getting better chemistry, getting on the same page, getting some better in-game leadership, I honestly think. I'm not trying to throw Dats under the bus, but I think Adren's definitely going to be a better in-game leader if they will just give him that role, or if Adren will take it. Maybe he doesn't want it, I don't know. But I think he should take the reins of the in-game leadership. He should be really hands-on with this team, and he should be making sure they're all on the same page, and he should be leading this team, I think. So we talked about all that. As far as talent on the team goes, I think Nitro has already shown potential with iBuyPower and those events that he played with them, and I think he's still done pretty well for this team. So I think they definitely have talent with Nitro. I think Fugly has also established himself to be very good at the ESCA event with this team. Even at the Katowice qualifiers, even though they lost both those games, the games were pretty close, and Fugly played really well. So I think Fugly's proven himself to be kind of an up-and-coming talent, just like Nitro, that can be fostered and grown and could be members of a really good NA team. So those two, I think, are locked in for sure. Dren, I think, would be the perfect in-game leader for this team, and I think the jury's still out on his op. We'll have to see. I think that against Torque, that clutch kind of looked amazing, his opping did. And he was playing against Skadoodle and some really good oppers in the NA scene. So I think he's capable to op. Maybe he's not going to be the flashy, crazy, great, amazing carry opper, but his opping is good enough, and his in-game leading can be huge. So those three, to me, are just definite members of a top NA team in my eyes. Now, as far as Naf and Daps go, if Daps is not going to be the in-game leader for this team, he's never really been known to be the heavier fragger on the team. But maybe if he doesn't have to focus on in-game leading at all, maybe he can be a better fragger. And it's not as if his fragging is abysmal or anything, but he's just not. He doesn't have the reputation of being one of their best fraggers, because he's focused on being an in-game leader, so he shouldn't have to be. And Nitro and Fugly are already established really good fraggers for this team, so he doesn't necessarily have to be a crazy star fragger. But maybe if he's not going to be the in-game leader, if Adren will ever take that role, which I think he should, if Dats can just focusing on fragging more and focus on finding another role that he can play on the team. I'm not saying you should cut the guy, but I think that Adren's definitely the better in-game leader, and at that point, when you make that swap, you have to see how else Dats can fit into the team. And if he can, great. If he can't, he can't, and maybe there needs to be a change there. I'm not really sure. When it comes to Naf has definitely had his moments where he's looked very good. You know, like the Season 17 ESCA land, like some other events, he's definitely shown that he can be a good player. But from what I understand, he can be very emotionally driven. So if things are going badly, he seems to kind of mentally check out in some situations, and he can have a poor performance when the going gets tough, so to speak. So but that also comes with the fact that he's just so young and inexperienced. I think Naf is maybe 17 or 18 years old, so he's just a very young guy. He's very inexperienced, and that's something the whole team suffers from. So that's something else to think about there. So I guess I'll go ahead and cut this video now. Basically, the bottom line is there's not a whole lot of data about Liquid. As a 5, they've only been to 3 events over the last 2 or 3 months. So there's just not a lot of data on this team to really be able to draw a whole lot of heavy conclusions from. But I wanted to do a video on this team because they are one of the top NA teams, and I've done videos on all the other teams, so I felt it best to do one on Liquid as well. And the concluding points is this, are just kind of the highlights. Are A, they need to increase their map pool. They need to practice and drill some other maps and try to improve, because it seems as of right now, in banning phases, they're pretty much out of it against really good teams after their 2 top maps get banned or whatever. So they need to increase their map pool. They need to get on the same page. There seems to be some lack of discipline and some sloppy play in a lot of different scenarios, especially on T-side, especially in post plants. They don't seem to be communicating correctly for trades and stuff like that, so that's definitely something to think about. They just need more time, in reality, because they are so inexperienced. They just need more time and more practice and more preparation, to be honest. They need to figure out what they're doing with this whole coaching situation, because right now it seems pretty useless, from what I can tell, when the guy's only been at 1 event for them out of 3 and doesn't help them online at all. And I think a coach could help them because of their inexperience, but doesn't seem to be implemented properly. And he wasn't at the biggest event they needed to perform at, and that's big to me. Can't blame him, but I mean, it stinks to not have that guy there at your biggest event, right? So they need to figure out this whole coaching thing. I think they need to make a change at the in-game leadership if they haven't already. Maybe they have made a change at in-game leadership already. I just don't know about it. But I know that Das was still their main in-game leader at the 3 events they've played at most recently. So I think it still is Das. But I think Adren needs to be motivated to take over the role himself and just do a good job with it. Fully dedicate to being an in-game leader and really get this team on the same page and get them prepped and get them ready to compete against big teams. And so that's what I'll leave it at. I mean, this team hasn't really underperformed. They haven't really disappointed. They just haven't seized opportunities to increase their ranks or increase their value or show that they're better than they are. They've pretty much just had neutral performances throughout the last couple of months of 2014 and so far in 2015. So I just think that they need some more practice, some more prep, some work on some maps, and they just need to really, I think, get Adren in an in-game leading position, let him just kind of take the reins and control this team and get him on the same page. And I think at this point, I just to be redundant if I say anything else. But I think the last thing I'll say, though, I didn't mention this before, but it seems like there's a mixed level of commitment on this team as far as being like a full-time pro CSGO team. So, for example, I know Adren quit his career, quit his job, and he's now a full-time player and streamer. And I also am fully aware that Nitro is still in school and can't commit full-time to playing on this team and being a full-time CSGO player. I'm not really sure about the other 3 guys. I haven't really talked to them, but I thought Dats was still in school for now, but he was planning on taking a break from school, at the end of this particular semester he's in right now. Maybe Nitro's planning on doing the same thing. I have no idea about Naf. I think Naf might still be in high school, so he can't really quit high school to play CSGO, I don't think. Maybe he's not. Maybe he's already like out of high school, maybe going into college his first year. I have no clue. But I think at some point, they also, besides being on the same page in-game and how they play with each other, they all also need to be on the same page as far as level of commitment to being a professional team and being full-time CSGO players. It seems like right now there's mixed commitment. And I can't really blame them because it seems like they signed their contracts for Liquid while they were already in the middle of a school semester. So you can't really expect someone to quit mid-semester. So maybe once that happens and the semesters are over, they can all full-time commit to the game and then it'll be fine. But that seems to be one of the issues they're facing right now. Is they seem to be kind of in this transition phase of full-time commitment and not full-time commitment to CSGO, which combined with their inexperience and youth is kind of just a recipe to hold them back. So we'll have to see how that goes as well. So I think I've pretty much hit all the main points I wanted to hit. At this point, I would just be redundant if I kept repeating myself on their points. But I think I've pretty much done the best that I could analyzing this team with such limited data and limited time spent together as a team. So hope this is insightful. Like I said, just follow up, and I'll have more videos coming out soon. Thanks.